The Veloran Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their ships were vast and powerful, their armies numbered in the trillions, and their cruelty knew no bounds. High Lord Zekthan sat upon his throne of crystallized suffering, a material literally forged from the compressed anguish of 1 billion slaves. His scales shimmered purple in the light of 3 dying stars that his ancestors had conquered long ago. He was pleased with himself. The empire was strong. The lesser species were broken. All was as it should be. "My lord," said his advisor, a thin creature named Vorn who had served the throne for centuries, "we have received reports from the Outer Rim." "Speak," said Zekthan, not bothering to look up from the data pad showing him the latest tribute numbers. "The humans have been talking." Zekthan laughed. It was an ugly sound like metal scraping against stone. "The humans, those soft little creatures we conquered 30 cycles ago, let them talk. They can barely survive without our guidance." This was what the Velorans believed. They had found humanity spread across a dozen worlds, young and divided. The conquest had been almost too easy. Humans fought among themselves. They had no unity, no central power. The Velorans had simply landed, killed anyone who resisted, and put the rest to work. Now humans served throughout the empire. They cleaned, they built, they mined. They died in the millions doing the dangerous jobs that no Veloran would ever do. They were nothing. They were tools. "Yes, my lord," said Vorn carefully, "but they have been talking to the other slave species." Zekthan finally looked up. "What do you mean?" "The Kreth, the Malori, the Sindith, the humans have been organizing." For a moment something cold touched Zekthan's heart, but he pushed it away. "Impossible. The slave species hate each other. We made sure of that. The Kreth despise the Malori for what happened in the Third Purge. The Sindith would never work with anyone after we destroyed their homeworld. They are broken, all of them." "I agree, my lord, it must be nothing." But it was not nothing. On a small moon called Terminus in the shadow of a dead gas giant, a woman named Alina Cross stood before a crowd unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. There were humans, yes, but there were also Kreth, their 4 arms folded in nervous attention. There were Malori, their blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. There were Sindith, silent and watchful, their grief still raw even after 3 generations. And there were others, so many others, species that the Velorans had crushed, species that had been forgotten, species that had every reason to hate each other. But they were all listening. "They told us we were alone," Alina said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. "They told us we were weak. They told us that our suffering was our own fault, that we deserved what happened to us." Silence, painful silence. "They lied." Alina walked among them. She touched the arm of a Kreth warrior who had lost his entire family to Veloran cruelty. She nodded to a Malori elder who remembered the days before the conquest. She met the eyes of a Sindith survivor who carried the weight of a destroyed world. "I have studied all of you," Alina continued. "Your histories, your pain, your losses, and I found something that the Velorans hoped we would never discover." She pulled out a small device and activated it. A hologram appeared, showing records and documents and communications that should have been impossible to obtain. "The Third Purge," Alina said. "The Velorans told the Kreth that the Malori betrayed them. They told the Malori that the Kreth attacked first. But look," she pointed to the records. "It was all planned. The Velorans started the violence on both sides. They made you hate each other so you would never stand together." The crowd stirred. Old anger mixed with new understanding. "The destruction of Sindith Prime," Alina continued. "They told everyone it was an accident, a weapon malfunction, but here are the orders." She displayed them. "Signed by High Lord Zekthan's grandfather, it was deliberate. They murdered your world because you were too united, too strong. They feared what you might become." The Sindith made a sound that could only be described as a sob that had waited 3 generations to be released. "This is what they do," Alina said. "This is how they stay in power. They keep us divided. They make us hate each other. They make us believe we are worthless, but we are not worthless. We are not weak, and we are not alone." She raised her hand. "I am human. My species has been enslaved for 30 years, but in those 30 years we have learned something important. We have learned how to survive, how to adapt, how to wait, and we have learned the greatest truth of all." Every eye was on her. "Together we are strong. Together we are millions. Together we are unstoppable." A Kreth warrior stepped forward. His name was Threk, and he had spent 20 years in the Veloran mines, watching his people die one by one. "You ask us to fight," he said, "but we have no weapons, no ships, no armies." Alina smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had been planning for a very long time. "We have been building," she said, "quietly, carefully, in every corner of the empire where they do not look. In every mine and factory and ship, we have been preparing." She activated another hologram. This one showed weapons, thousands of them, hidden in locations across the empire, ships that had been sabotaged, systems that could be taken offline with a single command, a network of resistance that stretched further than anyone could have imagined. "The Velarans think we are nothing," Alina said. "They think we are tools to be used and discarded, but tools can be turned against their masters, and we have been learning their tools for generations." A Mallory elder raised her voice. "And what do you want from us?" "I want nothing from you," Alina said. "I want something for you, for all of us. Freedom, real freedom. The kind where our children can grow up without fear. The kind where we can choose our own paths. The kind where no one will ever crush us again." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the Kreth warrior Threk knelt. It was a gesture of respect among his people. One by one others joined him. Mallory, Sindith, Human, all of them kneeling together. "We will follow you," Threk said. "We will fight with you. We will die with you if we must." Alina shook her head. "No, you will not follow me. You will stand beside me. We are equals in this. We are family now, all of us. And the Velorans are about to learn what happens when the slaves they built their empire on decide they have had enough." In the distance, a Veloran patrol ship passed by, completely unaware of what was happening on the small moon below. They did not know that the galaxy was about to change forever. They did not know that their comfortable world of cruelty and control was coming to an end. And by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late. The revolution had begun. In the cycles that followed, the Veloran Empire began to notice that something was wrong. Small things at first, a shipment of weapons that went missing, a mining operation that fell behind schedule, communications that were delayed or corrupted. High Lord Zekthan dismissed these concerns. "Technical failures," he said. "The slaves are stupid, they make mistakes." But the mistakes kept happening, and they were getting worse. On the industrial world of Farath, human workers had been manufacturing Veloran battlecruisers for 15 years. They knew every system, every weakness, every flaw. And when the time came, they simply stopped. Not in an obvious way, not in a way that would bring immediate punishment. They just started making small changes. A wire connected to the wrong terminal, a seal that was slightly too loose, a guidance system that was off by just a fraction of a degree. The first cruiser that failed in battle was blamed on the enemy. The second was blamed on bad luck. By the time the third cruiser exploded during a routine patrol, the Velorans were starting to get nervous. "Sabotage," said Vorn, his voice trembling. "It has to be sabotage." "Then find the saboteurs and execute them," Zekthan ordered. They tried. They brought in investigators. They tortured suspects. They made examples of hundreds of innocent workers, but the sabotage continued, because it was not the work of one person or even one group. It was the work of thousands, all acting together, all following a plan that the Velorans could not see or understand. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Sindara, something even more dangerous was happening. The Mallory had been farming for the Empire for centuries. They grew the food that fed the Veloran armies. They knew which crops were essential and which were not, and they had been talking to the humans. "They have ships," said a Mallory farmer named Yella. "They have weapons, but they cannot eat ships, they cannot eat weapons." Alina nodded. She had traveled to Sindara in secret, disguised as a common slave. How long can you delay the harvest without them noticing? Yella thought about it. A few weeks, maybe more. The overseers are lazy. They do not understand farming. Good, and when the food runs short? They will blame us. They will punish us. Are you willing to accept that? Yella looked at Alina with eyes that had seen too much suffering. My grandfather used to tell me about Mallory Prime before the conquest. He said the sky was gold and the waters were sweet. I never saw it. The Velorans destroyed it before I was born, but I would like my grandchildren to see a sky like that, even if it is not our old sky. Alina took her hand. Then we will build a new sky together. The food shortage began slowly. Grain rotted in the fields. Harvests were delayed. Transport ships broke down. The Velorans did not notice at first because they were too busy enjoying their comfortable lives. But soon, the soldiers began to complain. The workers began to grow weak. The Empire began to feel hungry. And in the slave quarters across 100 worlds, the message spread. Hold on, the time is coming. The Kreth were warriors by nature. The Velorans had tried to break them by making them fight each other for entertainment in the gladiator pits. For decades, Kreth had killed Kreth while Veloran crowds cheered and placed bets. But Threk had changed that. He had been the greatest gladiator in the Empire. He had killed more opponents than anyone could count. And then, one day, he simply refused. He dropped his weapon, looked at his opponent, a young Kreth barely old enough to fight, and said, "No more." The Velorans had beaten him nearly to death for his disobedience, but they had not killed him. He was too valuable, too famous. So they had sent him to the mines instead, thinking that hard labor would break his spirit. It had done the opposite. In the mines, Threk had found others like himself. Kreth who were tired of killing their own people. Kreth who remembered the old ways before the conquest, when their species had been united and strong. And then the humans had come. "You are natural fighters," Alina had told Threk when they first met, "but you have been fighting the wrong enemy." "I know," Threk had said. "I have always known, but we had no choice. They controlled everything." "What if I told you that we could change that? What if I told you that your people could fight for something worth fighting for?" Threk had looked at her for a long time, this small, soft human who spoke with such fire. "Why do you trust me?" he asked. "I am a killer." "Because killers can become protectors," Alina said, "if they choose to be, and I think you made that choice a long time ago." Threk had felt something then that he had not felt in decades: hope. Now in the mines and camps across the Empire, Kreth warriors were training in secret, not to kill each other, but to fight together, to protect the other slave species who were not warriors, to be what they had always been meant to be. The Sindith were different from the others. They were a quiet people, thoughtful, patient. Their homeworld had been a place of scholars and artists, of ancient libraries and beautiful temples. All of it was gone now, turned to ash by Veloran weapons. Many Sindith had simply given up after the destruction of their world. They existed, but they did not truly live. They were ghosts, haunting the empire that had killed everything they loved. But some Sindith had refused to let go. They had kept their culture alive in secret, passing down stories and songs and knowledge from generation to generation. And they had been waiting. "We are the keepers of memory," said an old Sindith named Karath. "We remember what was, and we have been recording what is." Alina sat with him in a hidden room, surrounded by data crystals that contained centuries of information. "Tell me, We have watched, we have listened, we have recorded every crime the Velorans have committed, every massacre, every act of cruelty, every lie. Karath's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. When the time comes, the galaxy will know the truth, all of it, and the Velorans will never be able to hide from what they have done. You have been doing this for generations. Since the day they destroyed our world, we knew we could not fight them. We were never warriors, but we could bear witness. We could preserve the truth until someone was strong enough to use it. Alina felt tears forming in her eyes. You kept hopping, even after everything. Karath smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Hope is the one thing they could never take from us, not completely. And now here you are, the humans who refuse to accept defeat, the species that looks at impossible odds and says, why not? We learned that from you, Alina said. All of you. From the Kreth who kept fighting, from the Mallory who kept growing, from your people who kept remembering. We are not special. We are just the ones who showed up late enough to see what you had all been building. Karath placed his hand on her shoulder. You are the spark, he said. The fire was always here, but it needed a spark. In the capital city of the Veloran Empire, High Lord Zekthan was finally starting to understand that something was very wrong. The food shortages were getting worse. His military was reporting equipment failures at an unprecedented rate. There were rumors of unrest among the slave populations, rumors that his investigators could not seem to trace to any source. And then there was the message. It had appeared on every screen in the Empire at the same moment. A human woman, looking directly into the camera, speaking in a voice that carried across the stars. My name is Alina Cross. I am a slave, or I was. Now I am free, and I speak for millions who are about to be free as well. Zekthan watched in disbelief as the message continued. For 10,000 years, the Veloran Empire has ruled through fear and division. You have told us we are worthless. You have made us hate each other. You have built your wealth and power on our suffering, but that ends now. The image changed, showing footage of Veloran atrocities, the Third Purge, the destruction of Sindith Prime, the slave pits, the torture chambers, everything that the Sindith had been recording for generations. This is what you have done. This is who you are, and this is why we are no longer afraid of you. The image changed again, showing slaves across the empire raising their hands in unity. Humans, Kreth, Mallory, Sindith, others, all of them together. We are the coalition of free species. We do not ask for your permission to be free. We do not beg for your mercy. We take our freedom with our own hands, and if you try to stop us, we will show you what happens when the oppressed finally rise. The message ended. The screens went dark. And across the empire, the real revolution began. The first battles were chaos. The Velorans had expected the slaves to rise up with makeshift weapons and desperate courage. They had prepared for mobs that could be easily crushed. They had anticipated anger without organization. They were wrong. On the fortress world of Karath, the human workers who had spent years maintaining the defensive systems simply turned them off. Not all at once. Slowly. Strategically. The shields went down first, then the sensors, then the communications. By the time the Veloran garrison realized what was happening, a fleet of ships was already in orbit. Ships that had been hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned space stations. Ships that had been stolen and repaired and armed in secret. Ships crewed by former slaves who had been training for this moment for years. The Kreth led the ground assault. Threk himself was at the front, no longer fighting in a pit for Veloran entertainment, but fighting for the freedom of everyone who had ever been enslaved. Remember, he shouted to his warriors, we fight to protect, we fight to free, we are not what they made us. The battle was brutal but brief. The Velorans were strong, but they were accustomed to fighting enemies who feared them. They did not know how to handle enemies who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. By dawn, Kareth had fallen, and across the galaxy word spread. The slaves had won their first victory. High Lord Zekthan responded with fury. He sent his most powerful fleets to crush the rebellion. He ordered mass executions of slaves on every world under his control. He declared that any species that joined the coalition would be exterminated down to the last individual. But his threats came too late. The sabotage that had been building for years now exploded into full effect. Ships would not fly. Weapons would not fire. Communications were compromised. The mighty war machine of the Veloran Empire was breaking apart from the inside. And the coalition kept growing. Species that had been too afraid to resist now saw that resistance was possible. Workers who had accepted their fate now saw that their fate could be changed. One by one, then dozens, then hundreds, they joined the rebellion. Alina coordinated everything from a mobile command ship that never stayed in one place for long. She rarely slept. She was everywhere at once, it seemed, appearing on screens across the galaxy, speaking to crowds, planning battles, solving problems. "You cannot keep this pace," Threk told her after one particularly difficult campaign. "You will burn out." "I will rest when everyone is free," Alina said. "And if you die before that happens, what then?" Alina looked at him. "Then someone else will take my place. That is the point, Threk. This is not about me. It was never about me. It is about all of us." She pulled up a hologram showing the current state of the war. The coalition controlled almost a third of the empire now. But the Veloran still held the core systems, still had vast reserves of ships and soldiers, still had weapons that could destroy entire worlds. "We are winning," Alina said, "but we have not won, and they still have the power to hurt us terribly." "Then what do? We do what we have always done. We adapt, we survive, we keep fighting." The turning point came at the Battle of Veloran Prime itself. The coalition had not planned to attack the homeworld so soon. They were not ready. But the Velorans had gathered their remaining fleet for a massive counterattack, and Alina saw an opportunity that might never come again. "If we hit them now, while most of their ships are away, we can end this," she told the coalition leaders. "It is too risky," said Yella, who had become one of the key strategists. "We could lose everything." "We could also win everything," said Threk. Karath, the old Sindith historian, spoke last. "For generations, my people have recorded Veloran crimes, but we have also recorded something else. Their weaknesses, their fears, their secrets." He activated a data crystal. "The royal palace has emergency escape tunnels, hidden routes that the High Lords have used for centuries to flee danger. I know where they are." Alina studied the plans. "If we can capture Zekthan himself." "The war ends," Threk finished. "Without their leader, the Velorans will fall into chaos." It was decided. The coalition would strike at the heart of the Empire. The attack was the most audacious operation in galactic history. Coalition ships jumped into the Veloran system using routes that should have been impossible, routes that human engineers had calculated by studying the Empire's own navigation data. The defense fleet was caught off guard. They had expected the attack to come at the border systems, not at their own doorstep. By the time they reorganized, coalition troops were already landing on the planet's surface. Threk led the assault on the palace. His Kreth warriors carved through the defenses like fire through dry grass. Behind them came humans, Mallory, Sindith, and dozens of other species, all fighting together, all pushing toward the same goal. Alina went in through the tunnels. She had a small team with her, including Karath, and a handful of the best fighters from every coalition species. They moved through ancient passages that had not been used in centuries, guided by maps that the Sindith had somehow obtained. They found Zekthan in his throne room, surrounded by his most loyal guards. The High Lord looked at Alina and laughed. "A slave," he said. "You think a slave can take my throne?" "I do not want your throne," Alina said. I want your surrender. Never. Then I will take what I came for anyway. The battle was short. Zekthan's guards fought well, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. When it was over, the High Lord lay on the floor, disarmed and defeated, looking up at the woman who had destroyed his empire. How, he asked, how did you do this? You are nothing, all of you, nothing but slaves. Alina knelt beside him. We were never nothing, she said. You just told yourselves that because it made it easier to use us, but we were always people, with hopes and dreams and the will to be free. You just refused to see it. I will never surrender. My people will never accept this. Your people are already accepting it, Alina said. Look. She activated a screen showing what was happening outside. Veloran citizens were not fighting. They were watching. Some were even helping coalition troops. The cruelty of the Empire had not just affected the slaves. It had poisoned everything it touched, including the Velorans themselves. You built an empire on suffering, Alina said. But suffering does not make loyal subjects. It makes people who are waiting for a chance to see you fall. Zekthan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there was something different in his expression. Not defeat exactly, but understanding. What will you do with us? He asked. Will you enslave us, destroy us, take revenge for everything we have done? Alina stood. No. Why not? It is what we would have done. Because we are not you, and that is why we won. She offered him her hand, not to help him up, just to show that she could, that she was choosing mercy over vengeance. Zekthan did not take her hand, but he did bow his head. The war was over. The years that followed were not easy. Building something new is always harder than destroying something old. There were arguments and conflicts and setbacks. Some species wanted revenge. Some wanted isolation. Some wanted things to go back to the way they were before the Empire, which was impossible because the universe had changed too much. But the coalition held together. Somehow, against all odds, it held. Alina refused to take any official position of power. I started this, she said, but I am not the one who should lead it. This belongs to everyone. Instead, she helped create the Council of Species, where every member of the coalition had a voice. It was messy and slow and frustrating, but it was fair. No one species would ever dominate the others again. Threk became the head of the coalition defense forces, but he spent most of his time training others to replace him. Warriors should not rule, he said. Warriors should protect those who do. Yella turned the agricultural worlds into the breadbasket of the new society, making sure that no one would ever go hungry again. Food is not a weapon, she declared. It is a right. Karath and the Sindith became the keepers of history, recording everything that had happened so that future generations would never forget. They also began searching for other species that the Velorans had oppressed, species that had been lost or forgotten, and bringing them into the coalition. And the humans. The humans did what humans had always done. They adapted. They innovated. They made friends with everyone. They argued and laughed and cried and dreamed. They showed the galaxy that there was another way to live, not through dominance and fear, but through cooperation and hope. 10 years after the revolution, a monument was built on Terminus, where the coalition had first been formed. It was not grand or impressive, just a simple stone pillar with words carved into its surface in every language of every species that had fought for freedom. The words were simple. We were many, we became one, we are free. Alina stood before the monument on the day it was unveiled. She was older now, her hair turning gray, her body bearing the scars of too many battles. But her eyes were still bright, still full of the fire that had sparked a revolution. We did it, Threk said, standing beside her. Yes, Alina said, we did. I never thought I would see this day, a galaxy without chains. Neither did I, honestly. There were so many times when I thought we would fail. What made you keep going? Elena thought about it for a long time before answering. Hope, she said finally. Hope and stubbornness and all of you. I could not have done any of this alone. No one could have. That was your gift, Threx said, making us see that we were never alone, that we were stronger together. Elena smiled. That was not a gift, it was just the truth. I just helped people see it. In the sky above, ships of every design and origin passed peacefully. Species that had once been at each other's throats now traded and traveled and talked freely. Children who had been born into slavery were growing up knowing only freedom. It was not perfect, it never would be, but it was better, so much better. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, the story of the coalition was becoming legend. How the humans had come and seen the chains that bound everyone together. How they had refused to accept that those chains could not be broken. How they had united the oppressed under a single banner and brought down an empire that had stood for 10,000 years. Other empires heard this story and trembled, because they knew that their slaves were hearing it too. They knew that the spark that Elena had lit was spreading, jumping from star to star, setting fire to the old order of things. The Veloran Empire had thought humanity was weak because they were soft, because they cared about things like fairness and justice and hope, because they refused to accept that cruelty was the only way to survive. They had been wrong. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons or their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to see the best in others and to bring that best into the light. It was their stubborn insistence that things could be better, that people could be better, that the universe itself could be better. And when they shared that belief with others, when they united the oppressed under a single banner of hope, the galaxy itself trembled. Not with fear, with possibility. Elena Cross died peacefully in her sleep, many years later, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species. She left behind no empire, no dynasty, no throne, just a galaxy that was finally truly free. And on her memorial, they carved the words that she had spoken so many times, words that had become the motto of the coalition, words that would echo through history forever. Together, we are unstoppable. The Veloran Empire was gone. In its place stood something better, something built not on suffering but on solidarity, not on fear but on friendship, not on domination but on the simple, powerful truth that every being deserves to be free. And that was the story of how humanity helped change the galaxy, not by conquering it but by showing it that there was another way, a better way. A way where everyone could stand together, under a single banner, and finally be free.